going to do something a little different today. I'm going to end this sermon with a question instead of with a statement. And I'll tell you the question right now. The question is, what do you believe? What do you believe? I've been told by a number of people that they really don't like All Saints Sunday. And it's not because they have anything against the communion of saints, communing with those of us, we saints here on this side of the veil. That's not a problem. It's the sermons that people hate. It's true. People don't like All Saints sermons. Typically the sermon is, you all are the saints. We are the saints. And even though we're imperfect, we're all saints. And we need to be happy that we're all saints. Or the message is, though you may die, yet shall you live. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Everything is fixed and it's all okay. And you're supposed to walk out on a cloud of air out the back of the church just with those words. Only I just think that it falls short. To be honest, I get frustrated with that too. I also want you to know that by the end of this sermon, surprise, I will not be able to prove to you scientifically that there's a heaven, if that's a shocker. I won't be able to scientifically prove that there's a God in heaven or what heaven looks like on the other side. But I will hope that we can see a little bit of hope and fearlessness if we dig a little deeper into this Gospel of John. First off, it's very clear in Scripture that Jesus believes in the afterlife. Jesus knows there's a heaven. It's very clear. He talks about it all the time. Just last week, do you remember the story that I told about the woman who married the guy who had 6 brothers, and the man died, and she married all 6 of them in succession, and all of them died. And the Sadducees, who don't believe in the afterlife, said, Jesus, this is what we're saying. This whole concept is so silly. Whose wife is she? And Jesus says nobody's, because it doesn't work like that in heaven. The only problem is he stops talking just as he's getting to the point where he's supposed to tell us what heaven is like. And that's kind of frustrating. So if Lazarus is going to this awesome place, heaven, why does Jesus bring him back? If he's going to such an awesome place, why would you bring him back? And the thing is, the Gospel of John is not like a cookbook. It's different than the other Gospels in one certain way. It's not mix a little bit of this, add a little bit of this, read this, do this, and you're going to get this out of the oven in 45 minutes. The Gospel of John is meant to be read not in a fluorescent lit classroom or even in a well-lit church. It's really meant to be read by candlelight and just a few verses at a time. The fact of the matter is, nobody knows why Jesus brought Lazarus back. That's a fact. We don't know. We have some ideas. We can postulate, but we really don't know. Maybe he felt so overwhelmed with pity that he brought Lazarus back for Mary and Martha. Maybe it was a symbol or a sign. You know, this is what's going to happen to me, foreshadowing. Next week, I'm going to be the one that's put into the tomb to rot. Maybe also, could it have been a little peek behind the veil? A little word of encouragement to us. Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. He's now back and walking around. Maybe it's to bring us a little bit of encouragement that there is indeed a heaven, there is indeed an afterlife. And Lazarus will die again, but it's a little bit of encouragement for us. And it was a big deal. There was a big difference between the 3rd day and the 4th day, by the way. But I won't go into the whole thing. But it means on the 4th day, the dude is really dead. 3rd day, his spirit is hovering around. 4th day, spirit's gone. It was a big deal that it was the 4th day. And back then, the problem was certainty, wasn't it? If you were in the Sanhedrin, There's a real problem with this Lazarus guy walking around. Everybody knows that he was dead. And Jesus comes and says, Lazarus, come out. That's a problem. If you're trying to keep Jesus marginalized, that is a real problem. What about us today? Certainty. To me, it seems like many of us are afflicted with an illness. And the illness is a fear of death. As we get older, I think a lot of times we get a little less fearful of death. But it's kind of an illness, fear of death. What if we could be more certain about things? I just want to offer you a few stories, a couple of ideas for you to consider. One, I'm told that the origin of the word saint comes from Latin sanus, which doesn't mean to be perfect. It means to be healed. It means to be made whole. What if God pokes through that veil between us and himself, or us and those ancestors who have gone on before, every once in a while, trying to heal us from our fears? I want to offer you just a few examples, and you can say, oh, that's just a coincidence, or maybe there's something more there. One of my favorite authors is Frederick Buechner. Can I get one more slide, Kate? Buechner writes in his book, Secrets in the Dark. He says, a year or so, a friend of mine died. He was an Englishman, witty, elegant, multifaceted. One morning in his 68th year, he simply didn't wake up. It was about as easy a way as he could possibly have done it, but it was not easy for the people he left behind, because it gave us no chance to start getting used to the idea beforehand, or to say goodbye in words if that's what we had wanted to do. He died in March, and in May, my wife and I were staying with his widow overnight when I had a short dream about him. I dreamed he was standing there in the dark guest room where we were asleep, looking very much himself in the navy blue jersey and white slacks he often wore. I told him how much we missed him and how glad I was to see him. He acknowledged that somehow. Then I said, Dudley, are you really there? I meant, was he there in fact, in truth, or was I merely dreaming he was? And he answered, he really was there. Can you prove it, I asked. Of course, he said. Then he plucked a strand of wool out of his jersey and tossed it to me. I caught it between my thumb and forefinger, and the feel of it was so palpably real that it woke me up. That's all there was to it. It was as if he'd come on purpose to do what he'd done and then left. I told the dream at breakfast the next morning, and I had hardly finished when my wife spoke. She said that she'd seen the strand on the carpet, and it had not been there the night before. I rushed upstairs to see for myself, and there was a little tangle of navy blue wool. Coincidence? For me recently, I had a dream. Well, I woke up at night, and I smelled cigarette smoke. Okay, you may think I'm nutty. I've told you this before. Marta's mother chain-smoked Kent 3 cigarettes. And we've had the weirdest things happen when we smell Kent 3 cigarettes. Well, I smelled Kent 3 cigarettes, and I got up from the bed, and I said, who can be smoking at 3 o'clock in the morning? And I went outside to the breezeway, and I said, somebody's standing out there smoking. It's overwhelming. I went outside, there's nobody. I come back into the apartment, there's no one. I get back to the bed, and right near my pillow, which I think is very strange, the smell of smoke is overwhelming. And I say, Roseanne, come on. Then I don't know what I did. I wasn't asleep, but I was in this sort of a trance, and I saw this vision, and there was lightning on the other side of this glass partition. And I heard Roseanne's voice, and it sounded like, she's desperately trying to tell me something. It was a very disturbing experience. And it went on for a while, and finally I just said, Roseanne, I'm sorry, I can't understand you. You believe me or not? You say, Charlie's making this up. Next morning I told Marta about it. I said, I think there's something wrong. Your mom was trying to tell me something, and there's something wrong. A couple days later, Marta had a dream, a semi-wake dream, and she's walking in a beautiful forest. And this beautiful woman walks up to her and takes her hand and looks at her and says, you need to go to the doctor, you have breast cancer. The day after that, I received a phone call from a friend of mine. Her name's Mimi Glaze. She's an older lady, very mystical woman. I knew her in seminary. She called me from Virginia Beach, and she said, how's it going, Charlie? And I said, well, we kind of got a little Marta, right? I said, what are you talking about? She said, Marta needs to go get a mammogram. I had a dream and someone told me that she has breast cancer. Coincidence? Or a peeking through the veil of those saints on the other side trying to communicate with us? I'll give you one more. In a class on death and dying, there's a group, the Midwest Journal of Medicine, a group of medical doctors who had had near-death experiences. One of them was a cardiothoracic surgeon. He's at a family reunion. His mom is too old to attend. He goes to the wall. Remember the old payphones? You guys probably don't. But you put a quarter or whatever and talk to the operator. He goes over to the side of the building to call his mom to say, we sure miss you. And right at that moment, lightning strikes the building. It blows him back 15 feet from the phone. He's dead. He reports that he got up and looked at his body and said, well, I don't need that anymore. I think I'll go check out and see what my wife's doing. He went and walked up the stairs, went into the room in a building across the campus where they were having a family reunion. And he watched his wife face paint all the children. There was one and another, and there was a tiger, and there was this and that. Then he says he went on this pure electric current made of love. Many people say this. And then all of a sudden he felt the most incredible pain. It felt like his leg had blown off. His head, he's throbbing. They had revived him. Of course, being a doctor, he looked up real quick and said, everybody don't worry, I'm a doctor. He reports, oh, I know exactly the order of who you face painted. Well, there's no way. I mean, he's over here. He said, yeah, first it was Susie, then it was our daughter, Jenny, then it was little Bobby, and you painted this one a tiger, this one a cat, this one a bear. Is this a coincidence? I don't know. You'll have to figure it out. You'll have to figure that out for yourself. One thing that I did learn working in seminary and in my counseling degree, I did a lot of work with trauma, death, and dying, and people who were going through the process. And we did a lot of studying of these near-death experiences. I believe them. One thing that is universally true, people who have had them don't fear dying anymore. They say that it's something very real. It's indescribable, it's wonderful, and we can trust it. What's all this about in the end? For me, it's the transcendental truth of the whole God project. Jesus says, in the end, I'm going to bring everyone together unto me. In Isaiah, we read, it's all peoples happy, and together God wipes away the tears. No more mourning, no more fear, no more illness, no more sickness. All peoples healed from fear of death and pain. It's like one of the movies that I show you the clips from all the time. A river runs through it. In the end, all things merge into one. For me, the divine healing, the everything being made whole. Can I get one more, Kate? This is Frederick Buechner's. I'll let you read that for a second. This is Buechner's thoughts on it. For me, the divine healing is when the saints on the other side, we truly have communion with the saints, with them, and us. as I wrap up, at my home church in Jacksonville, Florida, Riverside Presbyterian Church, the session decided to set aside a piece of ground on the church grounds where people could put part of their ashes. And I thought it was a pretty neat idea. So that it's, and part of my mother's ashes are scattered in eastern Idaho in the mountains, and part are at the church in the Columbarium. And I thought it was a really neat idea, because every day that you go to the church is All Saints Sunday, because you're walking past those gravestones, those markers, those bricks of the people who were so dear and so important, and the church was so dear and so important to them. I think All Saints Day is every day. Can I have one more, Kate? And it's that divine healing. I think when all of us are brought together, that will be the ultimate God project of healing. Every day is All Saints together. I absolutely believe all of this to be 100% true, but I cannot definitively prove it. So the question is, what do you